After 5 years with Ethan Crawford, I couldn't even afford rent. I pawned the ring my mom left me for $500. Later, I found out it was for Vivian Winters' fourth heart surgery. Over 5 years, our anniversary was canceled 4 times. When I had a fever of 103 degrees and went to the ER, he said on the phone that Vivian was getting a follow-up exam, and he couldn't leave. My friends all said Ethan was a good guy, loyal and devoted, and told me not to be petty. I believed them. I even felt ashamed of my occasional jealousy. Until yesterday, when I scrolled past a video of a trail marathon. The girl in the lead had a killer body and had just broken the women's division record. At the finish line, she jumped up and hung around Ethan's neck, laughing. "Ethan, I told you I'm perfectly healthy. You're just too worried." Those limited edition running shoes on her feet cost $500. Ethan smiled as he tied her shoelaces. "See? I told you it was worth the money." Looking at those shoes, I suddenly didn't want to ask anymore. Turns out the moon wasn't dim, it just never shone on my side. "Didn't I tell you Vivian had an EKG scheduled today? You still called 3 times in a row. Do you have to make a scene at a time like this?" Ethan pushed open the door, bringing in the chill of early autumn. He tossed his car keys onto the shoe cabinet by the entrance with a clatter. I sat on the sofa, my phone screen already dark. The image from that marathon video was still burned into my mind. "Why aren't you saying anything? What are you sulking about now?" Ethan changed his shoes and walked over. He sat down beside me. There was a faint smell of sweat and earth clinging to him. It wasn't the scent of hospital disinfectant. It was the scent of mountain air. He placed a plastic bag on the coffee table, picked up some tacos from a food cart on the way back. "Eat while they're hot." I glanced down at the tacos. Sauce was seeping through the paper bag, and they were loaded with crushed peanuts. "I don't eat peanuts," I said quietly. Ethan froze for a moment, then frowned. "Lily, when did you become so difficult? Vivian had 3 vials of blood drawn today. I spent all day running around the hospital with her, and I still thought to bring you dinner on the way home. Just pick them out. Is that so hard?" He looked at me as if I were an unreasonable child. I stared at the mud stains on his sweatpants. The color of that mud matched the mud by the finish line in the marathon video. "She had blood drawn today?" I asked. Ethan sighed and reached out to ruffle my hair. I tilted my head slightly, dodging his hand. His hand hung awkwardly in midair. His expression darkened. "What exactly do you want?" "I already told you the doctor said her heart isn't getting enough blood. She needs rest." "You think I want to spend every day at the hospital? It's my responsibility." If her brother hadn't gotten into that car accident saving me, would she be like this now? He'd repeated this speech countless times over the past 5 years. Every time I showed even a hint of dissatisfaction, he'd placed this moral crown on my head, making me feel like a cold, selfish, unreasonable woman. I lowered my eyes to my bare ring finger. There used to be a silver ring there, the only thing my mom left me. 2 days ago, the landlord had demanded rent. Ethan said he'd used all his money on Vivian's hospital bills. Running a fever, I'd pawned the ring for $500. "Do the shoes you bought her fit well?" I heard my own calm voice. Ethan's hand froze as he was pouring water. Water sloshed out of the glass and spilled onto the coffee table. He turned around. His eyes flickered, but he quickly regained his composure. "Did you go through my phone?" His tone turned cold. "Lily, I hate it when people invade my privacy." I didn't explain that I'd seen it in a marathon video. It didn't matter anymore. The shoes were recommended by her doctor. Ethan set the glass down heavily on the table. "Vivian has a heart condition. The doctor said she needs shoes with excellent shock absorption for her rehab exercises. They're just shoes. Do you have to be so petty?" He looked at me with disappointment in his eyes, as if I were a vicious woman who would even begrudge someone shoes for medical treatment. I looked at that familiar face, and suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. Rehab exercises. The kind that break women's division marathon records. I didn't call him out on it. I just stood up and threw the peanut-laden tacos into the trash. Ethan took a deep breath, suppressing his temper. "Fine. If you don't want them, forget it. I'll return the shoes tomorrow, okay? I'll transfer you the money for rent." He was certain I was just jealous. Certain that if he backed down just a little, I'd forgive him like I always had. "No need," I said. Ethan watched me walk back to the bedroom, his voice tinged with irritation. "Lily, you'd better know when to stop." The next morning, I went to the pawn shop in the old district. I wanted to get my mom's ring back. Last night I'd sold some coats and bags on Poshmark, and barely scraped together $500. The owner sat behind the counter and pushed up his reading glasses. "Young lady, you're too late. That silver ring was bought half an hour ago." I froze in place, my fingers tightening on my canvas bag strap. "Sir, the redemption period hasn't ended yet, has it? Could you help me contact the buyer?" My voice trembled. "I can pay more." The owner shook his head. The young couple seemed to really like it. They paid in full and left wearing it. I was about to plead further when the glass door of the pawn shop swung open. The wind chime rang with a crisp sound. Ethan pushed through the door, carefully shielding the girl behind him. Vivian, slow down. The doctor said you can't walk too fast. Vivian Winters was wearing those $500 limited edition running shoes, holding a cup of hot milk tea. She smiled sweetly. Ethan, I'm not that fragile. She raised her hand to tuck her hair behind her ear. On her ring finger, that familiar silver ring caught the harsh sunlight. My breath stopped. Ethan looked up and saw me standing by the counter. Shock flashed across his face, followed by a frown. Lily, what are you doing here? Vivian saw me too. She shrank back behind Ethan, looking nervous. Hi, Lily, she said timidly. I ignored her, staring straight at the ring. That's my ring. I looked at Ethan. Ethan glanced at the ring on Vivian's hand, his frown deepening. Lily, stop making a scene. I just bought this from this shop. How is it yours? The pawn shop owner coughed behind the counter, but said nothing. I looked at Ethan's self-righteous face and found it absurd. I pawned it 2 days ago. I said word by word. Ethan froze. He seemed to remember something. His expression changed. Vivian's eyes immediately reddened. She hurried to take off the ring. I'm sorry, Lily. I didn't know it was yours. Ethan saw I was feeling down lately and said he'd buy me a little gift to cheer me up. I'll give it back. Please don't be mad at Ethan. The more anxious she got, the harder it was to remove the ring stuck at her knuckle. A red mark formed on her pale finger. Ethan grabbed her hand. Stop. You're hurting yourself. He turned to me, his voice filled with impatience and accusation. Lily, if you needed money, why didn't you tell me? Why come here and pawn things? I already bought the ring and gave it to Vivian. She really likes it. It's just an old ring. I'll take you to buy a new diamond ring later. He spoke in the most rational tone while making the cruelest decision. In his world, my keepsake wasn't worth Vivian's momentary happiness. I watched him shield Vivian behind him. No need, I said quietly. Ethan thought I'd given in. He relaxed. He pulled a card from his wallet and held it out to me. There's $1,000 on this. Pay your rent and buy yourself something nice with what's left. Stop acting like I've mistreated you. I didn't take the card. I turned and walked toward the glass door of the pawn shop. As I pushed it open, I heard Vivian whisper, Ethan, is Lily really mad? Ethan's voice was flat. That's just how she is. She'll get over it in a couple days. Ethan's words blew into my ears on the wind. I didn't look back. I kept walking along the cobblestone street. When I got back to the apartment, a WhatsApp voice message from the landlord was waiting. Lily, when are you paying rent? You're 3 days late. If you don't pay today, you'll have to move out tomorrow. I won't have any trouble renting this place out. I listened to the message and replied, Mrs. Green, I won't be renewing. I'll move out tomorrow. After sending that message, I pulled out the dust-covered suitcase from under the bed. After 5 years, I didn't actually have much. A few seasonal clothes, some old books, and various odds and ends. I folded them one by one and packed them into the suitcase. At 7 that evening, Ethan came home. He was carrying 2 large pink storage bins. When he saw the suitcase in the living room, he paused. What are you doing? He set the bins on the floor and frowned. I was putting my last few books into a cardboard box. Packing, I said without looking up. Ethan walked over and kicked my suitcase. Lily, are you seriously throwing a tantrum? Running away from home over a broken ring? I already said I'd buy you a new one. What more do you want? I straightened up and looked at him. The landlord's demanding rent. I can't afford it. Ethan relaxed, his tone softening. That's all. He walked over to the sofa and lit a cigarette. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Vivian's roommate plays video games until the middle of the night. It's seriously affecting her rest. The doctor said with her heart condition, she can't handle late nights and noise. He exhaled a puff of smoke, looking at me through the blue-white haze. I'm planning to have her move in here for a while. I looked at him quietly, saying nothing. Ethan thought I was hesitating and continued. You can move into the small room and give her the master bedroom. Vivian's health is fragile. The master gets better light. This apartment only had 1 bedroom and a living room. The so-called small room was actually a storage closet less than 50 square feet. It could barely fit a single bed and didn't even have a window. Don't worry, I'll cover the rent from now on. Once Vivian's feeling better, I'll have her move out. He spoke in a consultative tone while issuing a non-negotiable order. In his view, since I couldn't pay rent, I had to accept his charity and arrangements. I looked at his self-assured face. Okay. I nodded. Ethan clearly hadn't expected me to agree so readily. The hand holding his cigarette paused. Surprise flickered in his eyes. You're okay with it? Yeah. I sealed the cardboard box with tape. Ethan smiled. He walked over and reached out to hug me. I knew you were the most understanding. I know this is hard on you for a while. Next month when I get my bonus, I'll take you to the Maldives. I stepped back, avoiding his embrace. I'm a little tired. Going to sleep. I turned and walked into the master bedroom, closing the door. Through the door, I heard Ethan on the phone with Vivian. Vivian, it's all arranged. You can move in tomorrow. Yeah, the master bedroom's yours. His voice was tender enough to drip honey. I sat on the edge of the bed, took out my phone, and bought a ticket home for tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow was our 5th anniversary. I woke up at 6 a.m. sharp. Ethan was still asleep on the sofa. He'd stayed up late last night helping Vivian pack. I didn't wake him. I wheeled my suitcase to the entrance. At 10 a.m. Ethan woke up. He saw me sitting in the living room and walked over, running his hand through his hair. You didn't go to work today? Took the day off, I said. He seemed to remember something and slapped his forehead. Right, it's our 5th anniversary. He walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water, twisting it open and taking a sip. Where do you want to eat tonight? I'll book a steakhouse. I looked at his perfunctory expression. Over 5 years, our anniversary had been canceled 4 times. The first time, he had to accompany Vivian to see a doctor in another city. The second time, Vivian was feeling down, so he took her to see the ocean. The third time, it conflicted with Vivian's birthday. The fourth time last year, he was at the hospital with Vivian while she got in for. No need, I said. Ethan frowned. What now? I'm the one who brought it up, and you still want to ruin it. Just then his phone rang. The name Vivian flashed on the screen. Ethan immediately answered, his tone instantly anxious. What's wrong, Vivian? What? You twisted your ankle? How could you be so careless? Where are you? I'll be right there. He hung up and grabbed his car keys from the coffee table. Lily, Vivian missed a step going down the stairs. Her ankle's really bad. I need to take her to the hospital. Go to the restaurant tonight without me. I'll meet you there when I'm done. He didn't even wait for my answer before rushing out the door. The door slammed shut with a loud echo. I sat on the sofa, watching the clock on the wall tick away. At noon I stood up. I put everything Ethan had bought me over the past 5 years into a black trash bag. There wasn't much, a few clearance clothes, a lipstick that smudged, and some cheap earrings. I placed the trash bag by the door, then took out my keys and set them in the center of the coffee table. I pulled my suitcase out of the apartment I'd lived in for 5 years. At 3 p.m., I was sitting on a train heading home. The scenery outside the window flew past in reverse. My phone vibrated. A message from the landlord. Lily, I'm going to collect the keys. The door's unlocked, so I'll just take them, okay? I replied with okay. Then Ethan's message popped up. Vivian broke a bone in her foot. She needs a cast. I can't make it tonight. Get yourself something good to eat. I owe you one. Oh, and did you clear out the storage room? Vivian's stuff is being delivered tonight. I looked at the words on the screen and typed out a response. All cleared out. Keys are on the coffee table. After sending those 2 sentences, I clicked on his profile picture. Delete. Block. Done. The train entered a tunnel. The cabin went dark. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. The train station in Green River was small, consisting of a single concrete platform and a waiting room that smelled of damp wool and kerosene. When Lily stepped off the train, a cold mist was falling over the pine forests that surrounded the town. She stood under the metal awning, holding the handle of her bruised suitcase, and took a deep breath. The air here was thin and sharp, free of the exhaust fumes and sea salt humidity of the city. She walked to her aunt's old cottage on the edge of the town. Her aunt had passed away 2 years ago, leaving the small timber house empty. Lily had the key, a heavy brass thing she kept on a string in her purse. The house was cold. The furniture was covered in gray cotton sheets that had gathered a thin layer of grit. Lily didn't turn on the heaters immediately. She walked to the window, pulled back the faded floral curtains, and looked out at the garden. The weeds had overgrown the stone path, and a wild rose bush had tangled itself around the wooden fence, its thorns thick and black. She sat on the edge of the old iron frame bed. Her hands were slightly dirty. From the train, her fingernails short and dry. For 5 years, her world had been defined by the 3-mile radius around Ethan's apartment. She had learned the exact bus schedules that would get her home in time to cook his favorite dinners. She had learned to speak in a quiet, low register so she wouldn't trigger his headache warnings. She had learned to look at Vivian's pink, fragile face and feel a deep, burning shame for her own healthy working-class body. She looked down at her bare hand. The pale circle where her mother's silver ring had been was still visible, though the skin was beginning to roughen from the cold northern air. I'm home, she said to the dark rafters of the room. She spent the next 3 days cleaning. She scrubbed the soot from the stone fireplace, washed the yellowed sheets, and used a rusty pair of shears to cut back the wild rose bush until the stone path was clear. She got a job at the local library, a quiet, low-ceilinged building where the elderly residents came to read the morning papers and drink tea from paper cups. The pay was small, only $800 a month, but her rent was free, and she spent her evenings sitting by her own hearth, reading old novels and listening to the wind rattle the pine trees outside. She didn't buy new shoes. She wore her old canvas flats until the soles wore thin, then patched them with rubber cement. Her phone remained silent. The WhatsApp icon had been removed from her home screen, the old SIM card sitting in a small glass jar on her mantelpiece like a dead beetle. The move-in did not go as smoothly as Ethan had anticipated. He had arrived at the apartment at 9 p.m. on the night of their anniversary, his shoulders aching from carrying Vivian's 3 heavy suitcases up the stairs. "Lily," he called out, dropping the keys onto the small table by the door. The apartment was dark. The smell of old takeout and damp cardboard hung in the air. "Lily, are you asleep?" he asked, walking into the living room. He flipped the light switch. The room was bare. The small bookshelf that had held her paperbacks was gone, leaving faint rectangular shadows on the wallpaper. The green ceramic vase she had bought at a garage sale was gone. On the kitchen table sat his spare set of keys, placed precisely in the middle of a clean circular space. Beside the keys was a heavy black trash bag tied with a double knot. Ethan frowned. He walked over and ripped the bag open. Inside were the clothes he had bought her for her birthdays, the cheap, clearance rack dresses that had gone out of style before she even wore them. There was the lipstick he had bought her when he forgot her birthday 3 years ago, its red tip smudged and dry. There were the small copper-plated earrings that had turned her earlobes green. "Still throwing a fit," Ethan muttered, his mouth twisting in irritation. "Over a $500 ring." "Ethan?" Vivian's voice came from the hallway, soft and trembling. She was leaning against the doorframe, her ankle wrapped in a clean white bandage. "Where is Lily? Is she still mad at me?" "She's just staying at a hotel for the night," Ethan said, his voice instantly softening as he walked over to support her. "You know how she is. She likes to make a scene to get attention. Don't worry about her. Let's get you settled." He carried her suitcases into the master bedroom. But when he opened the wardrobe to put her dresses away, he found that Lily had taken the hangers. All of them. The metal rod was bare, save for a single piece of blue string she had used to tie her old winter coat. "She's so petty," Vivian whispered, looking at the empty closet. "Ethan, maybe I should just go back to my dorm. I don't want to cause trouble between you two." "No," Ethan said, his hand tightening on her shoulder. "You're staying here. The doctor said you need a quiet environment. Lily will be back in 2 days when her money runs out. She can't even afford her half of the rent without me." He spent the next hour helping her unpack, but as he sat on the edge of the bed, afterward he felt a strange, cold draft coming from the window. The glass was cracked at the corner, a small detail he had never noticed before. Lily had always kept the thick velvet curtains drawn during the autumn to keep the cold out. Now, with the curtains pulled back, the wind whistled through the crack, making the room smell of wet asphalt and dead leaves. By the 3rd week, the apartment had begun to change. Without Lily to wipe the counters and sweep the entryway, a thin layer of gray grit had settled over everything. The sink was piled high with white ceramic plates, their edges encrusted with dried egg yolk and tomato sauce. Vivian did not cook. Her heart condition made it difficult for her to stand near the heat of the stove, so they ordered delivery every night. The plastic containers accumulated on the coffee table, their smells mixing with the cold air from the cracked window. "Ethan, the landlord called me today," Vivian said one evening, looking up from her phone. She was sitting on the sofa, her feet still clad in those $500 limited edition running shoes, propped up on a pile of old magazines. "She said the rent is 5 days late, and she said she's going to charge us $50 for the late fee." Ethan paused, his hand hovering over his laptop. "Did she?" he asked. "Yeah. And she was really rude about it. She said Lily always paid her portion on the 1st of the month." Ethan felt a sharp, sudden heat rise in his neck. Lily had a standing order. "I'll transfer the money tonight." He opened his banking app. His savings account was empty. The bonus he had been expecting from his logistics firm had been delayed due to a supply chain issue, and his checking account was down to $300. He had spent $1,200 the previous week on Vivian's private physical therapy sessions, the ones that were supposed to help her rehab after her ankle sprain. He looked at the balance on his screen, his fingers tightening on the metal casing of his phone. "Vivian," he said, keeping his voice level, "do you have any of your allowance left from your brother's estate?" Vivian's face instantly fell, her lower lip trembling. "Ethan, you know that money is locked in a trust until I'm 25. I can only use it for direct medical bills. If I touch it for rent, the trustees will audit me." "Right," Ethan said. "Right. I forgot." Are you asking me to pay rent?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. "My brother died saving you, Ethan. He told you to look after me." "I know," Ethan said quickly, standing up and walking over to sit beside her. He pulled her into his arms, but his chest felt tight, the smell of her expensive lavender perfume suddenly making him feel slightly sick. I know. I'm not asking you to pay. I'll handle it. I'll take out a short-term loan. Don't cry. It's bad for your heart. He held her, but his eyes wandered to the corner of the room where Lily's old bookshelf used to stand. He remembered how she used to sit there, her knees pulled to her chest, her fingers red from the cheap dish soap she used to save money. He had never had to worry about the rent when she was here, even when she was sick with that 103-degree fever. She had dragged herself to the bank to drop off the check because she didn't want to get on the landlord's bad side. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. She changed her number, he muttered, a cold sensation settling in his stomach. Who? Vivian asked, looking up. No one, Ethan said. Just a client from work. The revelation did not come from Ethan, but from the running community in LA. In early November, the annual Trail of the Pines marathon results were published in the local sports magazine. The cover featured a full-page photo of Vivian, her face bright and sweat-free, crossing the finish line with a time of 3 hours and 12 minutes, a record for her age group. At the bottom of the page, the caption read, Vivian Winters, 22, overcomes childhood asthma to claim the gold. The magazine was delivered to the staff lounge at the high school where Lily's old friends worked. Sarah, who had been Lily's closest friend since college, was sitting at the table eating a salad when she flipped the page. She stared at the photo. She looked at the limited edition running shoes. She looked at the silver ring on Vivian's hand, the one with the small, distinctive leaf engraving that Lily's mother had brought from the old country. What is this? Sarah whispered. She pulled out her phone and called Ethan. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice sounding tired and distracted. Sarah? What's up? Ethan, where is Lily? Sarah asked, her voice tight and dangerous. She's staying at her aunt's place for a bit. Ethan lied, his voice dropping into his familiar, defensive tone. We had a disagreement about some financial stuff. She's being really stubborn. Is she? Sarah asked, her voice rising. Because I'm looking at the cover of LA Runner. I'm looking at Vivian Winters running a 26-mile marathon in $500 shoes, wearing Lily's mother's ring. There was a long, dead silence on the line. It's for her rehab, Ethan stammered. The doctor said. You told us she was dying, Ethan. Sarah shouted. You told us Lily was being petty and unreasonable because she didn't want you to spend your weekends with her. You let Lily pawn her own mother's ring to pay the rent while you were buying $500 shoes for a girl who can run a marathon in 3 hours. Sarah, you don't understand the history. I understand that you're a liar, Sarah said, her voice shaking with rage. And I understand that we were all idiots for believing you. Where is she, Ethan? Where did she go? I don't know, Ethan whispered. His voice sounded small, like a child caught in a lie. She changed her number. She didn't leave an address. Good, Sarah said and hung up. Within 24 hours, the story had circulated through their entire circle of friends. The social media posts Vivian had made about her nice mentor and her beautiful early birthday gifts were shared, analyzed, and systematically torn apart. Ethan's Facebook page was flooded with messages from old college friends, some angry, some simply cold and disappointed. I can't believe we defended you, man. You let her sell her mother's ring? That's sick. Don't ever call me again. Ethan sat in his office, his head on his desk, the blue light of his laptop screen reflecting off his pale forehead. He had tried to delete the comments, but they came faster than he could click. His boss had called him into the office that morning, pointing to a thread on LinkedIn where a former client had commented on Ethan's lack of personal integrity. We need you to take some time off, Ethan, his boss had said, not looking at him. Your personal life is becoming a distraction for the firm. Take 2 weeks. Unpaid. The drive to Green River took 12 hours. Ethan had found the address by going through his old tax returns. Lily had listed her aunt's house as her permanent secondary residence when they first moved in together. The car, the old Honda he had bought with Lily's help, groaned as it climbed the winding mountain roads. The heater was broken, blowing only a thin stream of lukewarm air that did nothing to clear the frost from the corners of the windshield. He arrived in the town at 4 p.m. The sun was already setting behind the pine forests, casting long blue-black shadows across the snow-dusted roads. He parked his car outside the small library. Through the tall glass windows he could see the soft, warm yellow light of the interior. He stepped out of the car. His boots, expensive leather ones he had bought to match Vivian's outdoor gear, felt stiff and cold on the frozen gravel. He pushed open the heavy oak door of the library. A brass bell rang above his head. Lily was sitting behind the counter. She wore a thick, hand-knitted gray sweater, her hair tied back with a simple black ribbon. She was organizing a stack of children's picture books, her fingers moving with a quiet, practiced efficiency. She looked up when the bell rang. Her eyes met his. There was no shock. There was no gasp, no sudden drop of the books in her hand. Her expression didn't change at all. She looked at him with the same polite, slightly distant look she gave the strangers who came in to ask for directions. To the post office. Lily, Ethan said, his voice sounding thin and weak in the quiet room. He walked over to the counter, his knees shaking. Lily, please. I've been driving all day. The library closes in 10 minutes, sir, Lily said, her voice even and calm. If you need to return a book, you can use the drop box outside. Lily, stop it, Ethan whispered, reaching out to grab her hand. She drew her hand back, her fingers curling around the edge of a book. Do not touch me, Ethan. I'm sorry, he gasped, his eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. I didn't know about the ring. I mean, I didn't know you pawned it for the rent. If you had just told me. I did tell you, Lily said. Her voice was remarkably soft, almost gentle. I told you 3 times that I couldn't afford my share. You told me to stop being dramatic and to figure it out. So I did. I returned the shoes, Ethan said, his hands clawing at the edge of the wood counter. And I took the ring back from Vivian. I have it here. He pulled a small velvet pouch from his pocket and set it on the wood. The silver ring rolled out. It looked smaller here, away from the bright lights of the city pawn shop. Lily looked at the ring. She didn't reach for it. She didn't touch the velvet. The pawn shop owner sold that ring to you for $300, she said, her eyes lifting to his face. But my mother gave it to me when she was dying of cancer in a public ward. Its value wasn't the silver, Ethan. Its value was that. It was the only thing I had left of her. She looked at him, her eyes clear and dark as the forest outside. Once Vivian's finger touched it, it became just a piece of metal. You can keep it. Give it to her for her next marathon. Vivian's gone, Ethan sobbed, his shoulders shaking. She moved out last week. She said I was too negative. She said she couldn't handle the stress of my debt. I know, Lily said. You know? My coworker here, his brother lives in LA. He told me she's already living with her new coach. Lily stood up, picking up the stack of books. You chose her, Ethan. For 5 years, you chose her every single day. You chose her when I had a 103-degree fever. You chose her when we were supposed to be celebrating our anniversary. You chose her when you gave her my mother's ring. She walked to the small wooden door behind the counter, her steps quiet on the old wool rug. Now you have to live with the person you chose. Lily, Ethan cried, reaching over the counter, his fingers brushing the wool of her sleeve. Please, just give me one more chance. I'll move here. I'll work at the timber mill. I'll do anything. Lily stopped. She didn't turn around, but her shoulder dropped slightly. The library is closed, Ethan, she said. She stepped through the door, and the lock clicked into place with a sharp, heavy thud. The next morning, the first real snow of the winter fell over Green River. Lily walked down the stone path of her cottage, her boots leaving deep clean prints in the white crust. She carried a small basket of dry kindling she had gathered from the woodshed. The air was silent, the only sound the distant, rhythmic hum of the timber mill. On the river, she looked down at her hand. The pale circle where the ring had been was completely gone now, replaced by the healthy pink skin of her own hand. She smiled, a small, quiet movement of her lips, and walked back into her house, closing the heavy wooden door behind her to keep the warmth of her own fire. Inside,